Hi everyone, this is Vikas Dilaver. In this video, we will look into Spring for GraphQL, which is the latest release 1.0.0, and how we can implement different concepts of GraphQL in Spring Boot application. So just a quick refresher for GraphQL. GraphQL was introduced by Facebook in 2015, though it had been used internally since 2012. GraphQL allows users to it prevents the user from, or can allow the user to, or underfetch or overfetch the data. It for instance, we have an API where we want to have certain part of the data but don't want all of the data returned by that API. In the REST API we cannot achieve that, so that's why GraphQL was implemented. So if let's say for example a user had 15 fields or JSON fields which are returned by a REST API, and we want just 10 or 5 of them, not all of them, then we can simply avoid that using GraphQL, but it's not possible in RESTful API. So basically it has schema, resolver, data source. Data source is where data resides, and schema is where we define the basic structure of that GraphQL. Like it consists of queries, mutation. Query is similar to get, and mutation is similar to the post and put of patch of RESTful API. And subscription is a different concept. If you are familiar with server side events in Spring Web Flux, so it's quite similar to that concept, subscription. And basically we have different kind of schema related, like query. We can define the types. We can have query where we want to have get related methods, and then we have the mutation where we wanna perform transactional processes on the data, like create the user, update the user, or something like that. And subscription is where we want to have the data stream of data coming in all the time. If we subscribe, of course if we have subscribed to that, otherwise not. And so let's go to the Spring initializer, the most favorite thing for the Spring developer. So let's leave the default as it is, and we are interested in the version 2.7.0 and the Java version 17. Let's add the GraphQL support, and then the web to create a controller, and WebSocket, so that we can allow the subscription to work. If we don't have WebSocket dependency, then the subscription part doesn't work. So this is the pretty simple pom-dom XML, and these are the main 3 dependencies which we needed. Okay, so now let's, I have already generated that. Now let's look at the one I have. Okay, so these are the 3 things. Okay, and now let's look at the main application. Here we don't have anything special. Let's look at the controller. Okay, basically it a simple controller with add controller annotation, and I have used the repository. If we look into the repository, repository is in memory repository. There is nothing special in it, and it has 3 get all method, find all method, add user, and find by ID, and post construct, so that user can be added. So let's look at the find all. Okay, this is the find all, and now let's look at the schema as well side by side, so that we can quickly get the basic idea. Okay, so basically we have this user type. Okay, and we have this user type. I have used the record Okay, it has ID, first name, last name, and as you can see we have these, and in the schema part we are trying to get the all the users, list of users, so we are using add query annotation, and we have used the all users name of that method, and Spring will automatically drive it for the GraphQL resolver. And as you can see here we have all users. If we change it to something else like all user list, then we definitely need to change it. Okay, otherwise we can go with this approach name and value. Okay, but as we are using the derived one, so we don't need to go that way to keep things simple. Okay, add use get all users, okay, and here we are returning the list of users. If you are familiar with GraphQL, so array this is returning list of users, and find one is using ID, and this is returning the user object only. Okay, and then we want to do the mutation, like store the data. Okay, it's quite similar to the post in RESTful APIs. Okay, here we have that we have defined the input, like argument is where we want to it's a request body actually. Okay, but it's quite similar to the request body, and but we are using GraphQL, so we will be using argument, and argument has a type. Okay, we have given the same. Okay, we have given the same, and we have defined the mutation right here. Okay, and we have used the same name as the method of this controller, and it returns the, it takes the user input and it returns the user. And then we have the find by ID query, like as we have here. So it's this both are same. Okay, and we are passing the argument as ID. Okay, and then the most important part is the subscription. Okay, the subscription mapping. Okay, subscription mapping, and we have defined here, we have used the same name as in the controller and in the schema, and it also returns the user. But the important thing is it is reactive. Okay, it continuously sends back the data. I have used a basic logic to retrieve the list of users size, and generate only the long in between that range, and it will return us the user every second. Okay, so we will see in demo. Okay, basically you should be more interesting in the subscription mapping, because it's going to change a lot of things in coming days for the Spring developers. Okay, so let's start it. Okay, I have already started, but let's restart it. Okay, so basically the endpoint is exposed at GraphQL, and okay, so and we have these different endpoints, okay, available. Let's go to localhost GraphQL. I have already used it. Okay, we can, okay, let's get rid of it. And if we look at the right side, we have document explorer, we have query, we have list of queries. The nice thing about GraphQL is also it's the built-in documentation. It automatically generates documentation based on the schema. And here we have user have different fields in it. Okay, all the user, so and subscriptions as well. Okay, okay, so let's query the user. Okay, find one takes an ID as input, we need to give it. Okay, and now the interesting thing comes in RESTful API. We have to entertain all the data which is coming in. Okay, we cannot underfetch the data, or we don't want some columns in that network payloads to come in. So GraphQL allows that. Let's assume for a second we are interested in first name, then we can just curate. Here we go. And if we simply want a last name as well, then we can certainly do that. And if we want the ID as well, simply we can add that as well. Okay, and if we look at the all the users, and same goes for it, if you want just the IDs, then we can simply do that. Okay, here we have. And if we want to have first last name, simply just add to the payload, it will bring the last names in it. And if we don't want the ID, then it can be removed. Okay, nice. Okay, so this is the basic stuff for the query. Okay, so, and if we want to do transactions, like we want to change the add the user, like in our case we have I add user, and add user takes in a user, and it needs a object where we have ID one. We have ID, already have one. So let's add first name as test, last name user. Okay, here we have ID. By default we have. If we just add the first name as well, test again. Okay, we need to change the ID as well, 5. Okay, here we go. And if we just query the find one with 5 ID 5, and we want the first name, last name. Sorry, we should have moved it out of mutation actually. And okay, so here we got the one. Okay, so let's now test the subscription. Okay, subscription, we have get random user. Okay, get random user returns us the first name and the last name. Okay, it will give us randomly the users. Okay, so in order to subscription to work, we need to look into few of the configurations. First was the dependency on the POM. Okay, without it will not work. Okay, we must need to add it. And the other thing is in application.properties, we need to enable we add this WebSocket path. Okay, if we don't add it, it will not work. And another thing I forgot to mention, that if we don't enable it, by default GraphQL will not be enabled. Okay, as we have this nice UI to play around with GraphQL. Okay.